So let's get more on this. Joining us now is Democratic member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. I was interested to see what you put out on Twitter X on this, that there is no scenario tomorrow in which Putin doesn't become stronger and America becomes weaker. It's a pre-made disaster. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, the first thing that's happening here is the welcoming of Putin back into the order of major mainstream nations. He is visiting the United States for the first time since he became a war criminal. He is standing with the most powerful person in the world, and it is a sign from Donald Trump, essentially, that all is forgiven. And so this is a big moment for Putin because he essentially is being legitimized in the eyes of the United States and in the eyes of the world. We know there's not going to be any major peace deal here, largely because one of the parties to the war isn't at the table. You can't sign a peace agreement if Zelensky isn't there. And so there's not going to be any breakthrough. And my worry is that, well, the photo op in and of itself essentially legitimizes war crimes, telegraphs to other autocrats or evil men around the world that they can get away with murdering civilians and still get a photo op with the president of the United States. It could get worse because if there is no agreement, if Putin thumbs his nose at Trump and then Trump does not follow through with more weapons for Ukraine or with any sanctions, then it's essentially the final green light to Putin that he is going to be able to persecute this war
what's
without
your solution? Let's put up the 5 things that the Europeans and the president agreed on and involve Ukraine in future discussions, establish ceasefire before peace talks, no discussion of land swaps, insist on security guarantees for Ukraine, and ramp up economic pressure on Russia if no agreement is reached. Let's look at those 5. If those 5 European points are followed, and we understand that's a big if, so there's no need to even waste time talking about how that won't happen. But let's just, for argument's sake, let's say those 5 things happen. What is a just peace for Ukraine in your eyes? What does the final deal look like?
Okay, but Joe, we realize that there's one really important point missing from that list that Trump wouldn't agree on, and that's additional weapons for Ukraine. If the United States is not willing to continue to supply Ukraine, then there's no way that there is any just peace.
Well, you know, again, we'll be talking about in the coming weeks and months about that, because actually they're saying that we will sell to Europe and then Europe will sell to Ukraine. I suspect there's going to be a shell game involved there. But again, let's say I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. The United States should continue supplying weapons because that's the only thing that will put pressure on Vladimir Putin. But I think it's very important for all of us to hear from you and other leaders what a just final deal in Ukraine looks like, so we can set expectations not only here but among allies, that American leaders like you can set expectations for what that just peace looks like, what you need to see.
Okay, I think the most important element of that just peace is that it is a negotiation between Ukraine and Russia, not a negotiation between the United States and Russia. So if the Ukrainian government decides that they're going to sit down and do a diplomatic deal, and in that agreement they are willing to talk about territory, then that is Ukraine's right. Now, I think the only way that Ukraine would do that is if they also have a security guarantee from Europe and the United States. So a diplomatic solution probably involves a conversation around territory, but it also would require the United States to be able to guarantee that whatever territory remains in Ukraine's control will not be impeded ever again by an outside force like Russia. Now, Trump is not willing to do that. Trump is not willing to give that security guarantee. And he is seemingly not willing to even put Zelensky in a position where he can negotiate from a position of strength. So to me, this is about a direct negotiation. And right now, Trump is clearly not willing to empower Zelensky to be in that negotiation with Putin.
Well, and again, that's why I put up what the European leaders and Trump said, that they said there had to be a meeting between the two. And there is, from what we heard earlier this morning from other guests, it seems that the security guarantee that you just outlined, that security guarantee actually means more to the Ukrainians than exactly where those lines are going to be drawn on an eventual land for peace deal, right? Because nobody trusts Vladimir Putin. And so let's talk about the security guarantee. It's not going to be NATO. I know there are many people that say it has to be NATO. That's just not going to happen. I mean, that's been a debate in U.S. foreign policy circles, as you know, for the past 10, 15 years. What is a quasi-NATO security guarantee? What is the middle path to a security guarantee that sends a message to Vladimir Putin that we did during the Cold War, where we had enough troops in West Germany that if the Russians went in and killed them, that was a tripwire and we were in the war?
Yeah, I guess I don't concede that there is no way that in the aftermath of an actual diplomatic agreement, you couldn't have either a NATO guarantee or a guarantee that was jointly made between the European Union and the United States. I don't know that there is some halfway measure here. Ultimately, someone has to tell Russia that if they invade Ukraine after a peace agreement, that there is going to be a consequence. I don't know that Europe can do that on their own. So the United States is going to have to play some role in that guarantee to protect Ukraine after an agreement.
I'm just saying it may not be called NATO. It may not be called NATO, but is EU membership with the United States backing, is that an adequate security guarantee?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there has to be something beyond just the acceptance of Ukraine into the EU, because the EU doesn't right now involve, any kind of military protection. Right. So, listen, I'm open to different options, but I just know that Putin is not going to be able to be trusted on any agreement that he enters into. He didn't observe the Budapest memorandum. He didn't follow through on the Minsk agreement, and he likely will not hold to any new peace agreement with Zelensky unless he knows that he is ultimately going to be confronted by European or American forces if he once again tries to conquer Ukraine by force.
By the way, I'm glad you brought up the Budapest memorandum, because I think it is so illuminating on why the Ukrainians have no reason to trust not only Vladimir Putin, but the entire world community. The fact that we said, give us your nuclear weapons and we will protect your sovereignty, we will protect your boundaries. And then in 2014, the United States and the rest of the world did absolutely nothing. Talk about how that constantly hangs over any negotiations with Vladimir Putin.
Well, it hangs over this entire crisis in two ways. So the Budapest Memorandum was basically the United States and Russia saying, give up your nuclear weapons, and we promise to observe your sovereignty. But it was not a security guarantee, right? That agreement didn't say, if Russia invades you, the United States will get your back, or if the United States invades you, Russia will get your back. And so Ukraine knows that. Ukraine knows that an agreement that just says, I won't invade you, isn't worth the paper that it's written on, because they ultimately need someone who is going to come to their defense. But the second problem with the Budapest Memorandum is that it is a real signal to nations that they should be careful about giving up their nuclear weapons or a pathway to nuclear weapons. Ukraine had nuclear weapons. They gave them up, and now they are at war. Now they are at risk of losing their sovereignty. And so as we are trying to push back against other countries, for instance, in the Middle East, that are trying to seek weapons, the failure of the Budapest Memorandum and any follow-through mechanism is an invitation to other nations to obtain nuclear weapons as their best mechanism to prevent outside aggression.
So, Senator, returning to the event today, there's some growing concern among some foreign policy experts that Putin is trying to expand the agenda. He's bringing a business delegation. He wants to talk about maybe a new nuke deal, a few other items to try to potentially, the fear is, give Trump something he can point to as a win without making much progress in Ukraine. Give us your assessment on that. But to be fair, would there be some other things that Trump could accomplish today that would be something of a success?
Yeah, listen, I do think we have to admit that our relationship with Russia is and always has been deeper than just the crisis in Ukraine. We do need a new nuclear agreement with Russia. Ultimately, we need to find a way to bring the Chinese into a trilateral agreement around the restriction of nuclear proliferation. But, you know, there are certain other areas of effort that are important. I do worry, though, that Putin is going to focus on sort of economic enticements. And let's just be honest, there is really no meaningful economic relationship between the United States and Russia. We are not saving the American economy by opening up new trade routes with Russia. So if you hear headlines coming out of this summit that Trump has secured new economic investment commitments from Russia, you know, that's a sign that Putin has pulled one over on him. If there's a commitment to sit down and restart discussions over nuclear restrictions, and that looks real and binding, well, you know, that's something that folks should listen to.
Democratic member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Senator, thank you.